Today's video is brought to you by Decksaver. Protect your DJ gear today by visiting Decksaver.com. What's up, passionate DJs? Just wanted to talk a little bit today about cleaning your DJ equipment or your audio gear. That's something that I have to deal with a lot because, I do a lot of gear reviews and folks bring their stuff in here a lot and I borrow things, and so I always want to clean the gear up and send it back the way I found it. We're going to do kind of 3 different levels of cleaning here. So I'm looking at a DJM A9 right here, which I recently reviewed. You can check that out here. And so this one isn't too bad. I've just kind of left it out here for a few days so that we could kind of simulate, a typical cleaning scenario for something that you're constantly maintaining and it isn't too big of a job. This is just a quick job. Whereas this, the DJM 850, this is kind of my standard workhorse studio mixer, and it's a tool, and I don't take particular care of it. I clean it every once in a while, but this is just kind of here for pure utility. I haven't cleaned it in a while. It's long overdue, so we're going to go a little bit deeper on this one and get it looking nice like it should. And then finally, we have this. Now, this thing is a right mess. This is my, sort of front of house mixer, if you want to call it that. This is where all of my microphones connect, where my DJ mixers connect, where that computer over there connects for playing music, or when I'm doing production stuff and I want to test it on something that sounds more like a club setup with my QSCs back there. So this thing has been sitting here for, probably a decade. This old Behringer Xenix USB mixer. And I've got to say, just to fully out myself here, I am just fully abusing this mixer. With the exception of power outages or, moving gear around, this thing has never been turned off. It's literally been on for 10 years because I'm so frequently walking in here and turning on music or hooking something up or whatever, I never bother turning it off. I've never cleaned it either. It just continues to collect dust. This is what it's supposed to look like over here. That's the actual color of the finish, you see. But I've got to say, I've neglected this one for years, and man, it just keeps on ticking. This has been a great mixer, and I finally decided that I want to keep it working and looking nice for years to come. So this one we're going to do a deep cleaning and maintenance on, and really kind of prepare it for its future use here in the studio. There are a few things that you're going to want to have for general cleaning purposes. My one go-to thing is one of these kind of disposable duster things. So I recommend buying a name brand of it. I'll link the stuff that I use in the description below. You can just put this little feather duster thing on this little plastic handle, and then, for the case of this mixer where we just need to do a light cleaning or a, quick maintenance cleaning, it helps you get in between all these little knobs and sliders and buttons without having to take all that stuff off, and helps you get in between all these little things. And if you're doing this frequently, you can use it for several uses before you have to throw it out, so it really doesn't cost much. The other thing is microfiber towels, especially if you're getting into a little bit deeper cleaning where you're going to need to wipe down a lot of fingerprints and things like that. I buy them at AutoZone or like any auto parts store where they sell detailing stuff. And as far as actual products to use chemically, you don't want to use anything too harsh. I recommend using either a very gentle cleaner. In my case, I might just use a water bottle full of water with just 1 or 2 drops of liquid dish soap in it. You want it to be really mild. I don't want anything that's going to hurt the finish, pull any paint off, do damage to any decals or paint or anything like that. So this isn't anything that's going to require any harsh chemicals, so I wouldn't use anything that's going to get too crazy. Now let's start out with our easiest job, the DJM A9. Now the first thing I want to do is remove anything delicate, which in this case would be the little Wi-Fi antenna. I also removed some little protective jacks, which I'll put back on later. Then I'll just put together my little disposable duster and start gently working it around the surface of the mixer, up and down and between all the individual controls. Now I just want to be sure that we get all the surface dust off while being gentle enough to not knock our faders or switches around too hard. Now next, I'm going to take a clean microfiber towel and basically just use this to clean the entire surface of the mixer. I'm going to start with the screen and other glossy surfaces, and then simply move my way all around the mixer. I'm going to wrap the towel around my index finger and just use it to get around the base of all these controls where oils and fingerprints tend to gather up. I like to give one final swoosh with the duster to get any new dust or towel bits we may have left behind. Then I do the same thing around the sides and back of the mixer. A quick wipe down in between all the jacks will do, since this mixer was basically just set up once and then torn back down before shooting this footage. Now, while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and clean my XDJ1000s. Now, in this case, I'll clean the screen first, and I'll just use a little bit of regular old glass cleaner. I'll spray it directly onto the cloth, rather onto the device itself, and that's going to be a theme throughout this video. Now, the rest of it I can take care of with a clean, dry microfiber towel. And there you have it. Our stage 1 cleaning is complete. Now this stage is barely a tutorial, and it's more an example of how easy a job this can be if you just do it frequently. Doing this sort of quick maintenance cleaning every other time or so that you use your gear will save you from having to make more dramatic measures that we'll demonstrate next. Now of course, once you get your DJ gear all clean and shiny, the best thing that you can do is keep it looking that way, which is why I'm excited to use my new Decksavers. Now these are super strong polycarbonate dust covers, and they're designed to fit specifically on your audio gear while still being able to kind of show them off a little bit instead of hiding them away in coffin cases. And yes, Decksaver is the sponsor of today's video, but let me be clear, they didn't come to me, I reached out to them. I've been a big fan of Decksaver for a long time, and we've used them before here at Passionate DJ. I know that Trip Turlington has been using them for years on his 1200s, and I've put my hands on a number of them over the years. I really like how the covers allow you to leave everything plugged in so that your gear is always ready to go. You just have to pull off the cover and you're off to the races. I also like that the covers have a little bit of shape to them instead of just being boring square boxes. Full disclosure, Passionate DJ Studios is actually, unfortunately, a pretty dusty environment, partly because of all this heavy-duty garage HVAC stuff. And I'm often using blankets or towels and stuff like that to cover my audio gear, which works okay, but it looks very sloppy. With Decksavers, everything looks sleek and high-tech, whether or not they're actively being protected from dust. So keep your hard-earned audio or gaming gear protected by visiting the link in the description below, and big thanks to Decksaver. And now, let's move on to that DJM 850. Now I'm going to start by removing any knobs that don't protest too much. I want to give the surface a thorough cleaning, but if something seems like it doesn't want to be removed, I'm not going to force the issue on this old 2012 mixer. For me, that was the fader caps, which I decided wouldn't be in the way for our purposes here. I can just slide the faders up and down to get them out of the way. Because this mixer has a ton of surface dust, I am going to cover the faders like this before dusting it off, just to prevent it from all falling down in there. You could use a piece of paper, index card, piece of cardboard, whatever you need, and just cut it down to size. After we're dusted off, just like before, I'm going to use my microfiber towel and give this thing a wipe down. Now that most of my caps have been removed, specifically on the areas that get used the most, I can clean these surfaces much more thoroughly. A quick dusting off. And now I'm going to use this spray bottle full of water and just a drop or two of liquid dish soap. I don't want a bunch of residue that I have to rinse off, nor do I want a bunch of suds on there. I'm just going to drop a bit of soap in, swirl it around, spray it directly onto a fresh microfiber towel, and then starting with the screen and glossy surfaces, I'm going to wash the whole mixer down with this damp, highly diluted soapy water solution. We're basically going to repeat the same step as before, but this time with the help of a bit of fluids. Again, we don't want to spray anything straight at the mixer, and we don't want to use any harsh chemicals. I want to keep all of my paint and labels intact. The microfiber towel is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting here, in combination with a little bit of elbow grease. Now I'm going to wet the towel again, and just give each knob a quick wipe down as I reinstall it onto the mixer, one at a time. Now we just wipe down the back and sides with our damp cloth. And ta-da, good as new. Well, okay, not quite. This mixer's like 13 years old, and it has been used a lot, including for scratching, and you can see the wear around the crossfader, but hey, this looks so much better than before. At this point, you might take a can of compressed air and just quickly blow off the surface and inside of the faders, being careful not to blast it directly inside there to introduce moisture. Okay, it's time to get serious. On to our stage 3 cleaning, where we're actually going to do some teardown in order to clean and do some maintenance to the guts inside. Yeah, it's certainly not the worst I've seen, but still, this thing needs some TLC. The one thing I highly recommend is to do this sort of cleaning in a well-lit environment. Sunlight can do in a pinch for short periods of time, but beware of heat and UV exposure. I decided that before I pulled all these knobs off, I'd turn them all fully to the left. I figured it would help save me some time when I came to put it all back together, so we'll see if that pays off later. Now I'm going to pull off every single knob and control on top of this mixer with a firm but gentle pull and set it aside on the table. Since this thing has a lot of controls, it would be easy to mix them up, so I'm recreating the grid of controls on my desk surface. You might also just want to take a picture of the top of the device or put them in bags and label them or whatever you're comfortable with, especially if you can't always leave your project exposed like this. Where my cat owner's at. And there we go. A full set of grubby old knobs and a dirty butt mixer plate. Now's the part of the video where I start disassembling this thing, and I have to say that I'm not responsible for anything that you do to your electronics. Not all audio gear will cooperate with the disassembly process, particularly cheaper DJ gear like controllers. These are often sealed systems, not really meant to be taken apart. I'm not an expert in anything, and you should never do anything I say ever. Now, with all that said, let's remove these side rails and all the exterior screws from the side and bottom of the Behringer. We need to make sure nothing will snag when we separate the mixer, so I removed this USB plug from the back. As I pull the mixer apart, you can see that the power supply is mounted to the bottom plate and connected with a ribbon cable. Power supplies have capacitors in them, and I'm not an electronics expert, so I'm not going to go poking around in there, and neither should you. I am, however, going to separate these wires from the case, and disconnect this cable that grounds the power supply to the chassis. Now I want to disconnect the power supply from the main board, but someone smartly decided that this should have hot glue over it to keep it from separating, so I've got to remove that first. Luckily it wasn't too hard to just gently pry at this old bitter glue until it gave way and I could peel it with my fingers. By the way, the mixer obviously is not plugged into power. There we go. Now I'll just separate the little USB interface from the main board, and all of the rest of the ribbon cables. The one connecting all the audio inputs to the main board is glued down as well, so let's gently deal with that. And now I'm going to start removing all the screws from the main board. I put them all in little buckets with labels in case I got them mixed up. I also need to take off this little board, which is the effects processing unit. Then I started removing the mini screws from the top of the faceplate. And that's when I realized that I did this in the wrong order, because everything is held together with these two-sided standoffs, and so then this happened. Anyways, now we can separate the faceplate and see what the main board looks like on top. Shockingly, it's really not that bad. I expected there to be piles of dust and dirt caked on top of this, but it really wasn't like that at all. Now, it does look dirtier in person than it does on camera, particularly right around the fader rails, but it's not nearly as bad as this top plate. Now that we've disconnected most of the electronics, I'm going to go ahead and blast my soapy water mixture right on the top, aiming away from the audio jacks. I'm going to thoroughly but gently wash the top of the mixer and dry it to a shine. Since I didn't feel like going any further and removing all these audio jacks, I'm just going to use a Q-tip to clean up between here. If your situation is a little crustier, use a bit of electronics cleaner or rubbing alcohol. Then I'll just take my damp cloth and wipe it all down. And let's not forget the back. And oh yeah, this is looking fantastic. Now we should clean the inside of the chassis, and those side rails too. Now here's where I will add some chemicals into the mix. I've got some rubbing alcohol and this electronics contact cleaner, which I bought at Harbor Freight. This stuff is quick drying and safe for electronics, so I'll use it to clean the internals. And yeah, Q-tips of various size are helpful. This way you aren't wasting your time with the little tiny ones, but you have them when you need to get in the little nooks and crannies. I'm going to start by cleaning around the fader rails with alcohol. Again, it's not the worst I've seen, but it is dirtier in person. I'll get these all cleaned up, and then I'll start moving all around the mixer using my various sizes of Q-tip and dipping it in alcohol, and just cleaning every single control and trace and component on the board. Now I'm going to take my electronics cleaner with the little included straw, shake it up, and use it to clean these faders. These little EQ faders make contact on the sides, so I'll clean those up like this. I'll use a Q-tip to clean up the excess mess, and while I'm at it, I'll clean the smaller boards too, like the USB interface and the effects chip. Now we just need to deal with all these knobs and sliders. Right back to soapy water, and this time I'm going to use a soft bristle toothbrush to give every single piece a good scrub. And now our cleaning job is complete. This main board looks as nice as the day it left the factory, and hopefully it's on its way to serving my audio recording needs for years to come. And yeah, these knobs turned out pretty good too. Factory fresh. Now, realizing that the engineers probably had good reasons to glue those ribbon cables in place, I plan to put everything back the way I found it. Yeah, I made a bit of a mess, but it'll get the job done. Remember those little standoffs that fell out earlier? Those are important, let's not neglect them. I'll install those by screwing them into the top of the faceplate. When done, we have a place for our main board to, well, stand. So let's get this baby back together. I put one screw on top to hold things in place, and then turned it over and replaced every mainboard screw. Then connect the ribbon cables to the top module. Oh yeah, we better put that USB port back. I'm gonna need that. This was another cable that had hot glue on it, so when in Rome. Then I'll drop the effects module back in, which gently presses into this socket and is held in by 2 screws. And now I've got to deal with the power supply. It slides into these little grooves on the chassis and it's held in by 2 screws. Let's also definitely be sure to reconnect that ground screw. Now I'll just connect this final cable to the rest of the mixer and convince the halves to go together again. Now it's just a job of putting all the screws back in. Good thing we labeled where they go. Let's pop on these side rails. And time to put all the knobs back. And as it turns out, turning them all to the same position totally paid off. I was able to install these knobs with the quickness, without having to twist and turn every single one to find the right spot. And man, would you look at that, just as fresh as the day it left the factory. Honestly, I didn't even remember that it had this much shine. So there you have it, a complete teardown and maintenance cleaning of an audio mixer. Of course, whatever gear you're cleaning is probably different than mine, and you'll run into unique problems. That's why I presented this in 3 different stages, so you can sort of decide how far you want to go when it comes to deep cleaning your gear. So with that, I hope you've enjoyed today's video and have learned something, but remember, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. If you can keep your audio gear clean, you won't have to do this again anytime soon. So visit our sponsor Decksaver by visiting the link below, and keep your audio gear protected from dust and dirt in the first place, while looking awesome. I'm David Michael, and as always, keep on spinning.